Welcome back to the Within podcast. This is your host, Nikki Wallace, with co-host Allie Sartain. We're excited to have you back for kind of a fun. We don't really know exactly where this episode might go, but just feedback from our audience. And we put out a poll probably a month ago or so on what you wanted to hear, what we should talk about. And this one came back pretty strong.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite podcasters, Ed Milet, I keep going back to him. I'm sure Allie's getting tired of me quoting this, but he did a podcast a couple of years ago, I think, on what happens when your dreams no longer serve you. So, and this is, we're probably going to come from an entrepreneur. Well, one of my examples is pretty lifey. It's not
Yeah.
just entrepreneur business, but what happens? How do we frame like where does success come from? I don't even know how to say it.
Right.
There's I think the ideal. We actually asked our two nephews and my mom yesterday, what does success mean to you? And it is just so interesting. Everybody's ideal of success,
Mhm.
kind of what it is, and you know, our nephews, surprisingly, a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, are money based or freedom and whatever. But it's what is success and how do you define that, and how do you know when you've kind of made it, or maybe when you've made it and something doesn't feel aligned
Yeah.
anymore? So I was in a job that money equaled success.
Yeah.
So everybody knew what everybody made. I was in a sales job. I joked that sometimes I felt like I was on the Wolf
Yeah.
of Wall Street. We didn't do the cocaine, but we did party, and we were young and we worked a lot and we worked hard. And if you had made it when you were a contest winner and
Yeah.
making all this money and doing all the things, but then I made it year after year after year after year, and I was miserable.
Yeah.
I was so unhappy.
Yep.
I was so unhappy, and I think a lot of times people do equate success to with money or
Yep.
how big is your house or how big
Yep.
is whatever. So what do you define as success?
Yeah. I mean, in my industry, success, when I look back at, a peak or whatever in my career is, it was busy books. It was, the amount of money you were bringing in. But what that led me to was to being fully burned out, to kind of falling out of love with my craft a little bit, and to being in life and in a space that I didn't even recognize myself or be okay with like what was going on. I think I, essentially grew up in an industry where, yeah, I think it's very easy to define success as, what's going on in the outward, like
Mhm.
what you drive, what you wear, how much money is in your bank account. And it is funny because I hear so many people in our spaces say that, you get to this point of having it all, if you will, and feeling like complete shit, So definitely my perspective of what success is has completely changed. And it took me essentially hitting rock bottom in my life to realize that, like, okay, I achieved all of this material stuff, but,
Mhm.
I am in a bad place, and is success really what I thought it was to be? After all these years, I chased it and I got it. And I essentially kind of maybe lost myself in the process or lost, the plot twist, what I was really doing it all for.
I go back to when Matt and I got divorced. So Matt made partner in his firm very young. I was lucky enough to fall into a career at a fairly young age that it became something I very badly needed to get out of. But when you're in your 20s and you're
Hmm.
single and you're running around and making money, I got exposure to a lot of things very quickly and very young in my career, which I attribute a lot of the things I learned there to where I am now. But, I think I was 28 when we got engaged, and we'd been dating for a few years, and we both were seeing just crazy amounts of success from that point of view. Was the money point of view. Like, we were both making good money. We were both climbing the corporate ladders. I think climbing corporate ladder in a law sense is a little different, but he made partner. And then we were getting married and all the things were happening. We bought this 5,000 square foot home, beautiful home from two executives that were retiring in the community. Like, 28-year-olds shouldn't be doing some of these
Right.
things, right? And we were driving the newest cars. I had the beautiful ring. And I just one day, our wedding was like over the top, all of the things. And on paper, everything from the outside, I think looked so like glamorous. There's all these things going on that, people would die to have. And
Right.
I was going home and crying every night. I was so miserable in my life. I mean, I was going out and partying every night with people I was working with. We were just not taking care of
Right.
ourselves. Matt and I were growing apart, kind of unbeknownst to ourselves. And it was just such a crazy, crazy time. And it
Yeah.
took our divorce.
Right.
I'll never forget sitting on my couch in this condo, which even this, like when I tell this story, I feel so silly sometimes because it's like, and then I was building this beautiful house like in the suburbs. And I was this is it.
Yeah.
This is what all this money and, climbing the ladder and all of this got me. And
Right.
I just remember thinking, there's no way, there's no way that this is
Yeah.
it. So it still took me several years, I think, after that. We got back together, obviously, and all the things kind of started happening from there. But it took him finally that looked at me one day and
Yeah.
was like, you are a miserable person. Like you are
Yeah.
coming home, we had a little baby at the time before I quit my job and you know, you're miserable. Like you're just not a fun person to be around. And coming off of a divorce and getting back together and having a baby right away, that was a pretty bold move in hindsight that he had the balls to kind of say that to me. But I'm always so grateful that
Yeah.
he did because that kind of started this train of holy shit, I'm not happy and I should be. And why
Right.
am I not? And I think I had almost a grief for myself for a while. I almost looked at myself wrong. Like, why am I not happy when I should be? Like
Right.
everybody on the outside world is telling me I should be. And I couldn't even go to some of the therapists I went to at the time because this is actually when I got into numerology and really started to understand who I was and what I was at the core. But because even therapists would, tell me, well, you're just this or you're just
Yeah.
that. And it's like, what is happening?
Right.
So I tell that whole story to open up Pandora's box so that
Yeah.
Allie can share what she wants. But I think I was kind of like that classic example of I literally had it all and I burned it down. And then it still took a couple of years to kind of figure out. And then life still has evolved. Still,
Yeah.
I would say I have more of an inner peace after doing a lot of inner
Right.
work and kind of figuring out who I am at my core and having that be a foundation.
We both have our, similar kind of crazy experiences and journeys. And I think one thing when I look back at every, thing that I've been through and all of that is that, you live your life and you get through school and then you go to college and then you get this career and it's always like the labels of like what's
Hmm.
next, who are you, you start putting on all these hats. And for me, I think I got to a point in my life where like I didn't even know who like I was anymore. Like
Right.
I didn't even know, I had all these titles that people gave me, but was that really who I was? And I think I got lost in, you know, building things for other people, and it changed the way I showed up in my
Right.
business, and it didn't feel like me anymore. And so I think we get so lost in building what other people think success looks like that we forget, who we are and why we're doing it in the first place.
Right.
And I've done a lot of stuff in my life that people are like, shit, like you're gonna do that? Like I built my dream salon and I did all of that, and just to turn around and sell it and to start over from ground zero. And then, people looked at me like I was crazy, and maybe I was, and all of that. But it gave me some of my biggest learning lessons when I stopped letting other people define my success. We packed up and moved to Arizona, and that was the hardest season of my life for many personal reasons. But it got to a point where, you know, do you want to just like do things that everyone like thinks is normal and is okay? But what comes along with that is, I saw a quote once and it was like, do you want to be the average person? Because if that's true, you'll end up divorced, overweight, and broke,
Yeah.
by the time you're middle aged. And I started asking questions of like, does this salon, it kind of became who I wasn't anymore.
Yeah.
I kept, some of who I was to, fall into place and to appear a certain way or to, attract a certain clientele. And I kind of forgot who I was in that process a little bit. And same with like my life in marriage, I didn't want to be the wife anymore where things just became, day in and day out and certain behaviors or things started to be okay
Right.
and it wasn't okay. And so I started to go against the grain and really ask like, is this really like success? Does this really feel good for me anymore? And, it was hard as shit. And it led to a lot of tears, a lot of heartache, my own stuff that I went through with my family and personal. And it took asking those questions and really redefining, the life I wanted to live. And, a lot of people probably still look at me and think that I'm crazy. And maybe it looks like I'm a mess on the outside, but me challenging and asking those questions has never brought me more peace in my life ever.
And clarity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about this earlier, but one thing I really learned when going through the divorce, and a mistake I made was that I asked a lot. I welcomed the
Yeah.
questions, right? So I would ask my friends, I would ask, my closest confidants at the time, I'd ask my family, but wrong, wrong, bro. Like,
Yeah.
because then I had all these things in my head all the
Yeah.
time, right? Like, well, if I do this, this person might think this, or if I do that, this person might think that. And,
Yeah.
for all the good that was having at the company I was working with, like, there was a lot of like keeping up with the Joneses, and
Yeah.
so some of that got into my head, right? And I was welcoming them, but then I would, when I was at some of my darkest times, like, those people would not, that were the first ones to give
Have an
their
opinion.
feedback.
Yeah.
They were the last ones to answer the phone the nights that I was really struggling.
Yep.
There was a lot of times in that being in your head
Uh,
and being by yourself, and some of those life changes or whatever you're going through, is some of the scariest places to be. And there was a lot of nights where I, not necessarily proud, but I took, like Unisom or something at 6 o'clock when I got home just to go to bed because I didn't want to have to think, and I didn't want to have to be living kind of in this nightmare that I was going through. And during that season, I really reflected a lot on that season because I was like, what went wrong here? Like,
Yeah.
what is God, what is the universe trying to teach me right now? And I think one thing I really took away from that, and I hold dear to my heart now, is none of those people were in my bed and, like, talking, not that I
Yeah.
wanted them in my bed, but, like, none of those people, like, it was my head on the pillow
Yeah.
that had to live with the thoughts and the journey that I was going through.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, why the fudge did any of their
Yeah.
comments matter to me, right? And I think I've held that close because as I've gone through, because I think we go through evolutions of life, like,
For
all the
sure.
time. I don't know if their opinions or not would have changed my divorce, and I have no idea. I was so like lost at that point in my
Right.
life. But moving forward, now that I've done the inner work and I've really have like a good foundation of who I am, and I'm proud of that, like, your opinion does not is not my business. Like, I don't need those opinions because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's living this journey, and we all live such different lives and go home with ourselves each night. So
Right.
like, you have to really learn how to be at peace with yourself.
The older I've gotten, and the more, stuff I've been through in my life, when I sit and I think about what success looks like now, it's, to feel okay sitting in the silence,
Yes.
to have, the knowledge about my body to know when things are awry or when I need to maybe sit and think about something a little bit,
Right.
to feel safe and happy genuinely in my marriage, to be able to slow down and love the time with my children, to grow a business that feels like in alignment with me
Yep.
because I now talk about a lot of things that aren't, mainstream or exciting or sexy, with
Yeah.
like wellness and hair loss and all of that. But I think when we start doing out of things in alignment and we start chasing, what we think we're supposed to be, after, I think it really messes with us and it changes the trajectory of everything,
Everything, yeah.
And so we always say this, but I think it's just so important to get crystal clear and get to know yourself. And I
Mhm.
will be excited one of these days to talk about, human design and all of that because we all have ways, that we're wired differently
Mhm.
and that we respond differently in all of this. And I'm the first person that will sign up for a course on telling me how to do something. Or, I called when I was in my hard time, salon owners, I talked to you and you said to me, like, it might look crazy to the rest of the world, but you're the only person you have to be okay with laying your head down at the end of the night. Like, you have to know that your decision is that's okay with you, and that's gonna
Somebody
support,
else matters. Yeah.
yeah, and support who you want to be, because at the end of the day, everyone is it's human nature to judge, and it's really easy and quick to pass judgment on people and their decisions. But I refuse to live a normal life and want to, live a bold life, and live one that's in alignment with me. And I think that redefining success and what I want that to look like, has drastically changed, but it feels really good.
Yeah. So one thing just as you're talking that I want people to take away from this is we were very lucky to grow up in a home I think that welcomed these conversations and challenged. Like I think mom and dad did a good job of
Yeah.
challenging or being okay, maybe not all the time because there's four of us.
Yeah.
Maybe they were just really tired. I don't know. But I
Yeah.
think I always felt empowered to ask questions and
Yeah.
to, question. And so I guess a hope that I have for people listening to this is if you don't have that at home, like find somebody, and we've talked about other episodes, like having your network and having your people, like find those people that make it that it's okay if you ask the questions and maybe we're those people for you. I don't know. But and if something feels off and if something feels right, like you know yourself
Mhm.
better. You are the one living in your own skin. You are the one that puts your own head on your pillow at night and wakes up and you're going through this human life and know that it's okay to ask the questions or to question when something doesn't feel right. And then that doesn't always have to be outwardly. Like maybe that's something just intrinsically that you're not in a great situation. Like something just like I should feel differently when I come
Yeah.
home every day. Like it's not normal to always be down. It's not normal to like feel like you're stuck on a hamster wheel. Are there times of your life where that's going to be the case? 1,000%. And
Right.
sometimes you got to like just, get through those times and know that that's like a means to an end. But in general, like if you're feeling off every day, like there's something up. So, surround yourself with people that are going to embrace you as you kind of figure out what's going on because success to everybody looks different.
Ways that you can get, back into that and kind of figure out what is important to you is like sitting and journaling.
Yes.
I think one of the most powerful things that I've learned how to do is just set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes, even,
Yeah.
or 10 minutes. Sit in complete silence, or put on like a little whatever frequency or music and the lightly in the background, but no distractions, and just start writing. And it'll be crazy because once you just don't stop moving your pen, and then I find myself even writing more. But, you know, figure out who you are. Like, I saw a quote once, and it was like, you know, you're not in this life to be understood. It's to understand yourself.
Mhm.
And when you can understand yourself is when, the real success happens, and when you can have a life that feels really good. Because I think some people, I've talked to some people, and I feel like they make life supposed to be so hard. And while there are hard times, I think it's meant to be beautiful. And I think we're meant to achieve our dreams and to live, uh, an amazing life.
Yeah.
And so, really, just kind of figuring out who you are and what you want,
Yeah.
and not letting all the what you should be doing, or, what judgment you might face from the decision you make. And as long as it's in alignment with you, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. When I was going through kind of everything that I was just talking about, I found Simon Sinek. He had like this course that it literally gave you like, I think it was only like 5 or 6 steps. It wasn't even like a lot, but
No.
like one of the steps was you had to go interview people in your life. And I was like,
Such a good
what
one.
the fuck? Like, I don't think I'm going to do this, but I did. It meant so much to me. Like, I would love to like do a course or
Yeah,
something that people can because it was just the interviews were though like what do you think like my strengths are, what do you think my weaknesses are. I don't think we always know, like we always assume that like oh well like they're gonna think I'm this or they're gonna think I'm that.
yeah,
And so the answers that I got back, and I talked to like very different people. I talked to some people in my family, but then I talked to a lot of people that weren't. And I think like the
mhm,
feedback that you get back about like how people and how others see you was interesting, but then the whole thing on the course was to really like foundationally who are you and what do you stand for?
yep,
And I think that was like a small part of my journey kind of in the okay, like I need to work on myself and understand who I am. Uh, because if I don't take that time, like none of this other stuff really
yeah,
matters.
yeah, I mean,
So
it's so true and so good.
yeah. And then as I've evolved over the last 5 years, like with my entrepreneur journey, I think those, like as we're talking about, have really been like the staples. And does that mean that can't change. Like, no, I mean, you still
Mhm.
evolve as a person as needs change. But I think having that foundation has just been so solid for me. So,
Yeah. Powerful tools, just tapping into who you are.
so to round this out, so what does success really look like? What would you say? Like, what do you think success is?
Yeah, I mean, I think for every person it's going to look different, and like I said earlier, I think just having more of an understanding for myself has allowed me to not get hung up or frustrated on certain ways that I'm being or
Yeah.
responding, and a greater like love and respect for myself,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, to me, success has definitely changed. I'm not chasing after something anymore. It's allowed me to work more like in flow, if you might say.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm in this building stages of kind of reinventing myself again, but I have never felt so good about something. And
Yeah.
to me, I already feel like more success in what I'm creating now than what I had before because it felt, not in alignment.
I think quit comparing yourself
Mhm.
to the outside world.
Yeah,
I think if you can find the inner peace of who you are and what does success like, ask yourself that question. What does success mean? For some people, they don't give a shit about millions of dollars. They just want to feel safe at home.
yeah,
So how do you get there? How do you do that? Like, what are the small steps that you can do?
yeah,
For other people, financial well-being is important to them. Then what does that mean? Like, is that I want to make $1 million? Is that I want to have a big house? Like, those are two very different things.
right.
And so I think, for me, the success of being able to really be in alignment with myself and then knowing that it's okay. I think my husband has been good for me. He's as I've gone through the entrepreneur journey, and this could be something we talk about another time. As your business evolves, like, it's easy to
Yeah,
say, like, oh God, I'm in the limelight. Like, now I have to change. Like, my social media story is going to change. And I think even as I've walked through like this potential within and the people co and like I'm having a third baby, like, what is this going to look like? And
right.
I always now have him and paired on my shoulder. Like,
Ugh,
why do you care what other people
yeah,
say? Like, why do you care?
right.
Like, and I think it's hard not to because we're in such a like visible world. But I think the minute you can, you know, kind of rise above that in
Yeah,
some ways and just know what matters to you and what matters to your family, or, and compare yourself to yourself
yeah,
instead of yourself to this world that most of the time is like, if you shifted the camera
yeah.
4 frames to the left, you're gonna see all of the pile of toys in the
The
room
Barbies.
and the Barbies that are taking a bath in the
Yep,
back of the truck or whatever they're doing over there. I mean, I think you'll realize that everybody's life at the end of the day, is not so different, that we're all kind of going through it. There's so many tools, there's so many health self tools now. Connect with us, like,
yeah,
connect with your people, but just get to know yourself and what you stand for and what your boundaries are. And I think you'll start mentally feeling a little bit better. It takes time, but
yeah, definitely time. Give yourself grace.
it's
It's
a
a
big
good
one.
place to get started, and I think it's always gonna evolve and change, so being open to, what that might look like for you and maybe always redefining success. We might say something different next year at this time.
Yeah. Well, we hope this helped. And if there's ever any questions or any other like feedback or thoughts for the show or any topics that you would love to touch on, or if you'd love to be a guest, we have some good guests I think that will be
Yeah,
coming up to talk about their journeys, their stories, wellness. We're here for all of it.
yeah,
So we'd love to hear from you, and we hope you all have a great week.
yeah. Bye.